I'm not aware of who's in nobody's house. I don't know that particular thing. I know the homies got jumped. I know we gonna deal with that. And I am aware of, hey man, I know where the niggas that killed J-Dog are and where we going? Where are we going? I didn't give a fuck if we pulled up on Santa Claus. It's up.
March 1992, and 17-year-old Anna Ray X-Rated Brown thinks he has something to prove. He's an up-and-coming Sacramento rapper, raised on the city's south side where he ran with the 24th Street Garden Block Crips. He started recording as a young prodigy, finishing his first song at 16 alongside Sacramento rap icon, Brother Lynch Hung. In early 1992, he dropped his debut album, Psychoactive, creating a buzz through the city. The album cover was as provocative as the lyrics, showing X-Rated pressing a .38 caliber pistol to his temple. On a spring night in March 1992, X-Rated and a crew of 4 fellow gang members piled into a car, guns in hand. Days earlier, 2 members of the 29th Street Crips who were linked with 24th Street had been killed, and the Garden Block Crips wanted blood for blood. Their target, a house where the Harris family lived, known Meadowview Bloods territory. Under the cover of darkness, the group crept to the front door. Inside, 42-year-old Patricia Harris, a hard-working mother of 4, was asleep, unaware of the danger approaching her home. Suddenly, a voice shattered the silence. "Police, open up!" the group shouted, faking as cops. Ms. Harris, groggy from sleep, came to the door in her nightgown. Before she could react, the gang kicked it in. What followed was chaos and terror.
So we go over to Meadowview. We just go straight up to the door. The little homie who identifies himself as having kicked in the door, he identified himself as having kicked in the door, right? Myself and Maurice went in the house. This is what Abdul Griffin said. So once we go in, it's pitch black. And a light comes on down the hall. And our victim turns the corner. And shots are fired immediately, just at the movement. And unfortunately, it turns out that the person that was struck was Mrs. Patricia Harris.
The crime scene told a grim story. A busted door, bullet holes, and bloodstains marking the end of a mother's life. The Sacramento police moved quickly. Within days, 5 suspects, all Garden Block Crips ages 15 to 17, were rounded up and charged in the Harris murder. Among them was X-Rated, identified by witnesses as a ringleader of the attack. The local media pounced on the story.
2 months ago, a gang of teenagers kicked in Patricia Harris's front door in the middle of the night. One of them shot and killed her. Police arrested 5 teenagers and charged them with murder. Now prosecutors may try to prove at least one of the teens had a premeditation for killing in cold blood that he wrote about in rap songs.
Sacramento had never seen anything quite like it. Metal detectors were set up in the courthouse and snipers positioned on the roof during the trial. X-Rated, barely old enough to vote, suddenly found himself cast as either a folk hero or a villain, depending on who you asked. In court, he was defiant, even testifying in his own defense against his attorney's advice. He brazenly admitted to being a gang member, a move a detective later said showed Brown was just a kid in over his head, playing a role he didn't fully understand. One of X-Rated's younger accomplices, only 15, turned state's evidence and testified that X-Rated orchestrated the invasion as revenge on the Meadowview Bloods. Prosecutors painted Brown as the cold mastermind behind the murder. The label stuck. As evidence, the prosecution reached straight into X-Rated's own artistic arsenal. They introduced lyrics from Psychoactive as proof of premeditation.
Because they pretty much sanctioned the jail lyrics based from a rap song.
They did. And the cover. You know, it's interesting that they said, okay, this is the murder weapon on the album cover, but you can't do forensics on a picture. So they never found a murder weapon. The reality is they never found a murder weapon. And the other thing is they chopped my song up. So the song is called Still Shooting. That's that first song on Psychoactive, and it's called Still Shooting. The intro is called The Murder. But the media started referring to the song as The Murder and editing my lyrics so that they can make it say what they wanted to say.
The Attorney General of California even tried to use a Son of Sam law to seize any profits from X-Rated's music for the victim's family, blasting the rapper's work as a simple attempt by a criminal with marginal talent to cash in on a murderous past. All the while, X-Rated's mother, Shirley Jazz Brown, sat in the courtroom, watching her son's dual lives collide. She had sensed trouble before it all went down, even begged Anare to skip town with her that fateful week. A few days before the murder, Jazz had invited her son to join her on a trip to Texas, hoping to get him away from Sacramento's boiling gang tensions. But X-Rated insisted on staying for a release party celebrating his new single. The night Patricia Harris was killed, Jazz Brown woke from a terrible nightmare of people running and danger all around. Moments later, in a chilling twist, the phone rang. It was a call from the Harris house, where panicked voices demanded to know who Jazz was and who she knew in Sacramento. Detectives later explained they found Jazz's Texas phone number scribbled on a scrap of paper at the crime scene, leading to that bizarre call. It was as if fate itself had tried to warn of the carnage to come. In the end, the evidence and testimony sealed X-Rated's fate. He was convicted of murder for the killing of Patricia Harris, and in 1993 was sentenced to 31 years to life in prison. Just 18 years old, he arrived in state prison with decades to serve. Through the 1990s and 2000s, X-Rated released a flurry of music from behind bars, his lyrics growing more reflective as the years ground on. By the 2000s, after more than 20 years locked up, the boastful teenager had matured into a reflective man. He survived a near-fatal prison stabbing in 2010, retaliation after he refused to produce an album for some gang-affiliated inmates.
In this incident report, X-Rated tells investigators, "It was Northern Riders who stabbed me." In this case, these Northern Riders, all lifers, were allegedly extorting X-Rated to force him to produce a rap album of their own.
The incident only deepened his resolve to change. Finally, in September 2018, after 26 years behind bars, X-Rated was granted parole. Ironically, letters of support from unlikely allies, Lyle and Eric Menendez, infamous convicted murderers he'd befriended in prison, helped persuade the parole board that Brown had reformed.
He was one of the first ones to teach me to utilize my influence in a way that would allow me to have positive outcomes.
He was paroled in 2018 in part due to a letter of support from Eric and Lyle.
At 44 years old, the man who once vowed to be the biggest story in hip-hop emerged from prison gates a humbled figure, determined to start anew.
When they come to my block, when they come to my set, my hood, want to go to war, I took them to war. Me, I took everybody to war. That's what these motherfuckers, every other rap niggas, they didn't do that.
The streets of North Philadelphia have birthed many a hustler turned rapper, but few walked the line between hip-hop and crime as brazenly as Abdul A.R. Ab West.
I already took 13 shots. I don't know what it's for, you know why? Because I kidnapped, I robbed.
In the 2010s, A.R. Ab's name rang out from the rocks of Philly to millions of YouTube viewers as the boss of OBH.
You see, it's about 20 savages out there. I'll run all of them. I'll run that, man. I'll run this shit. I'll run OBH.
A rap crew with street-certified credibility. Unlike many rappers, A.R. Ab's reputation wasn't just talk.
No rap nigga in history lived the way I live, cuz. Nobody with a buzz.
But behind the mixtapes and DVD freestyles that made him a hood celebrity, A.R. Ab was building more than a music career. By 2017, he had turned OBH into a full-fledged drug trafficking empire that would eventually bring the hammer of federal law enforcement down. On the surface, Original Block Hustlers was a record label and group of aspiring rap artists, grinding for a come-up. In reality, OBH was flooding Philadelphia's streets with narcotics and leaving bodies in its wake. According to federal prosecutors, from March 2017 through June 2018, A.R. Ab acted as the kingpin of a sprawling operation that imported narcotics from California to Philly in bulk. Under his watch, OBH maintained at least 4 stash houses across the city, In one raid, agents seized 10 kilograms of coke and 5 pounds of meth at a single location. The operation brought in hundreds of thousands of dollars. Enforced with fear and violence, AR-AB routinely posted videos and other messages on social media where he threatened violence and boasted of his power.
You cowards, man. Come see us, man. I swear to God, you come down this block, your shit gonna get filled up with so much fucking smoke, nobody gonna make it off the fucking block.
To the feds, these weren't just idle words. They were evidence. In one infamous incident, a former OBH member named Robert Johnson, aka RJ, had a falling out with West. Johnson was suspected of siding with a rival, which AR-AB saw as the ultimate betrayal. According to court documents, AR-AB ordered a member of the organization to delete RJ for being disloyal. Not long after, in October 2017, Robert Johnson was ambushed and popped multiple times, left to perish on a Philadelphia street. The hit was carried out by AR-AB's close associate Dontez Tez Stewart, who became OBH's designated triggerman. On West's command, Stewart gunned Johnson down, a ruthless message to anyone in OBH about the price of betrayal. AR-AB's reign was turning North Philly into a war zone, where he held the crown. The law closed in gradually. Starting in mid-2017, local police and the FBI began surveilling OBH's activities. They conducted undercover buys and watched the crew's movements. In September 2017, Philadelphia PD raided a suspected OBH stash house at 3234 North Sydenham Street, a row house in the heart of North Philly. There was a significant bust, but just the tip of the iceberg. AR-AB doubled down on caution, moving his main stash to an upscale apartment building where he thought law enforcement would never suspect a thing. The One Water Street luxury apartments in Philly's Old City. But by May 2018, the FBI had tracked him there too. Agents stormed an apartment on Columbus Boulevard and hit the jackpot. 10 kilograms of coke and $20,000 in cash seized in one go. It was one of the biggest drug hauls in recent Philly history. For most, losing that much product would be a crippling blow. For AR-AB, it was almost a point of pride. Days after the raid, AR-AB released a new music video, brazenly referencing the FBI seizure. In the song, he rapped about the feds taking 10 of them, a clear nod to the 10 bricks of coke they'd confiscated. Far from keeping a low profile, he treated the whole thing like just another chapter in his legend.
$250,000 lost, got a broke heart, and they snatched my dog, that's the worst part.
Referring to the $250,000 those kilos were worth. And they snatched my dog, that's the worst part. One rat destroy everything you work for. I pray to God that he don't tell them who he worked for. The lyrics were practically a confession, and a threat rolled into one. He expressed how a snitch, one rat, can bring down the whole operation, praying that his man Tez Stewart wouldn't flip on him. But that prayer would go unanswered. Stewart was already in custody, and he was talking, detailing how AR-AB ran the organization. It was a fatal miscalculation on West's part. What he saw as lyrics, the FBI saw as evidence. In April 2019, a federal grand jury handed down a sweeping indictment charging AR-AB and 8 members of OBH with 16 counts including conspiracy to distribute large quantities of drugs. AR-AB's defense tried to argue that he was just a rapper exaggerating for clout, that OBH was primarily a music label. But the mountains of seized drugs, the text messages about prices and deals, the surveillance footage of hand-to-hands, it all spoke to a reality that couldn't be denied. In November 2019, the jury came back with a unanimous verdict, guilty on all counts for AR-AB. At the sentencing hearing on April 15, 2021, AR-AB, 38 years old, husky build, beard sprinkled with gray, stood before him in an olive green prison jumpsuit, arms crossed defiantly. The judge acknowledged AR-AB's talent and the opportunities he squandered. AR-AB was sentenced to 45 years in federal prison, effectively a life sentence for a man who would be in his 80s by release.
I mean, all I can remember, the world was finna end, and I had to find the devil and kill the
The sun-faded streets of South Central Los Angeles had seen their share of violence, but nothing could prepare them for the nightmare of April 10, 2002. In a modest apartment off Figueroa Street, a horror straight out of a nightmare was unfolding. Antron "Big Lurch" Singleton, a 25-year-old aspiring rapper from Dallas, was losing his mind, quite literally. Big Lurch had come to LA chasing music fame, bringing a Texas-sized hunger for success. He'd been part of a Bay Area rap trio called Cosmic Slop Shop. When the group fell apart in 1999, Lurch headed to Los Angeles to pursue a solo career. Standing at 6'6", he was an imposing figure, with his verses littered with violent imagery, more similar to a slasher film than reality. But by early 2002, reality and fantasy had fatally blurred for Big Lurch. That spring, Singleton spiraled into heavy PCP use, a potent hallucinogen infamous for provoking psychosis and superhuman delusions. Friends noticed odd behavior, Big Lurch muttering to himself, eyes vacant one moment, then raging the next. On the night of April 9, 2002, Lurch was in his South LA apartment with a buddy and smoked angel dust until the line between life and horror movie disappeared. The next morning, neighbors in the Watts neighborhood saw a sight straight out of a gore flick. A naked man covered in blood, stumbling and yelling in the middle of 110th Street. He was barefoot, eyes wild, his chest and face smeared with red. He stared at the sky and roared incoherently, as if fighting demons only he could see. Startled onlookers called the police. When LAPD officers arrived, they found Singleton agitated and out of his mind, babbling. They tackled the giant and took him into custody, unaware of the gruesome scene that awaited them up the block. Inside Big Lurch's shared apartment, the living room looked like a slaughterhouse. On the floor lay the lifeless body of his 21-year-old roommate Tynisha Isaias. She was a friend who had offered Big Lurch a place to stay while he got on his feet in LA. Now she had suffered a fate almost beyond description. A 3-inch blade from a kitchen knife was broken off between her shoulder blades, indicating the force of the stabbing, and her body was cannibalized. Even veteran homicide detectives were shaken by what they found. As crime scene techs collected evidence, a medical exam would later confirm that the blood on Singleton's face and in his gastrointestinal tract belonged to the victim. In his PCP-fueled madness, Big Lurch had eaten parts of his roommate's body. Tynisha Isaias, a young mother of 2 children, had been beaten, mutilated, and partially devoured in what the press would soon dub one of the most gruesome crimes in rap history. Los Angeles prosecutors charged Singleton with murder, plus special allegations of torture and aggravated mayhem, legal terms that barely encompass the horror of the act. When Big Lurch came down from his drug-induced hell, he found himself behind bars, facing life in prison, and struggling to comprehend what he'd done. His attorney, Milton Grimes, prepared an insanity defense, arguing that Lurch was in a PCP psychosis so deep that he couldn't distinguish right from wrong. Grimes described how Singleton had ingested an enormous amount of PCP and effectively lost his mind by the time of the killing, testifying that Big Lurch suffered from mental impairment caused by habitual PCP use. Essentially, the drug had fried his brain's ability to control violent impulses. In another era, such extreme behavior might have led to a mental hospital instead of prison, but California law was not on Singleton's side. Under a statute passed in the 1980s, a defendant cannot be found legally insane if their mental illness is self-induced via drugs. The prosecutor pointed this out bluntly. Voluntary intoxication was no excuse for murder. The judge agreed. Despite the almost unfathomable circumstances, the court declared Antron Singleton legally sane and fit to stand trial for the heinous acts. The stage was set for a brief but dramatic trial in the fall of 2003. The jury needed less than a day to decide Big Lurch's fate. In June 2003, a Los Angeles County jury found Singleton guilty of first-degree murder, torture, and aggravated mayhem in the death of Tynisha Isaias.
Who rose to fame with a one-hit wonder is now charged with murdering his cousin. DeKalb County Police arrested Ricky Hawk today. You might know him by his stage name Silento. He's accused of shooting his cousin to death last month.
He was once the kid everybody danced to, the Atlanta teen who turned a viral challenge into a certified hit. In 2015, Ricky Lamar Hawk, stage name Silentó, dropped Watch Me. The song became a cultural moment, racking up streams, social media dances, TV shows, and talent competitions, all with kids doing the move. He was a teenager with a hit, personality, and dreams bigger than Stone Mountain, Georgia. But fame is a crooked mirror. By the time the spotlight dimmed, the shadows from his past had grown long, and the demons he carried inside began taking over. 2 years before the fatal night, the cracks had already begun to show. In August 2020, Silentó was arrested in Santa Ana, California, on a domestic violence-related charge. Then, in Los Angeles, he allegedly burst into a home he didn't recognize, seeking his girlfriend and wielding a hatchet, striking at 2 people before he was disarmed and arrested on assault charges. Then later that same year in DeKalb County, Georgia, he was pulled over driving 143 miles per hour on I-85. He apparently told officers he was able to drive so fast because he's not a regular person. These incidents hinted at a growing instability. Then came January 21st, 2021, early morning hours in Panthersville, just outside Decatur. At 3:37 a.m., police received a call about gunfire near Deep Shoals Circle and Corners Crossing. When officers arrived, they found Frederick Rooks III, age 34, suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. He was dying. Nearby, investigators collected 10 bullet casings. Security footage from a neighbor's camera captured a white BMW SUV speeding away soon after the shots. Rooks had been last seen riding with Silentó. Family told police that Hawk had picked him up in a BMW. The GPS data placed the vehicle near the crime scene. When arrested on February 1st, 2021, Silentó eventually admitted to shooting Rooks. Ballistics tests matched the bullets at the scene to the gun found on him. At trial, prosecutors levied several charges. While he was originally indicted on malice murder and felony murder, as part of a plea deal, those were dropped in favor of voluntary manslaughter. Silentó pled guilty, but mentally ill to that, plus aggravated assault, possession of a firearm during a crime, and concealing the death of another. On June 11, 2025, DeKalb County Superior Court Judge Courtney Johnson sentenced him to 30 years in prison. The plea agreement spared him what would likely have been a life sentence under a full murder conviction. In court during sentencing, members of Rooks's family wept openly, one pleading that Silentó deserved far more time than 30 years. From the gallery, the weight of loss pressed heavily. Meanwhile, Silentó's defense lawyers argued that mental illness, long present, had played a role. One attorney said Hawk had battled mental health struggles since age 12, and that pleading guilty, but mentally ill, was meant to ensure he'd be placed in a facility suited to his condition rather than a generic prison wing. Officials said the state's diagnostic center would evaluate him for placement in a facility equipped to treat mental health issues. Today, Silentó's career lies in ruin. The viral dance track turned into a cautionary echo. The mic that once held promise is now silenced behind prison bars. The fame that once drew cheers now draws grim headlines. He is credited as incarcerated on his public profiles. He once told an interviewer on The Doctors that he struggled with depression, that fame only added pressure, and that he didn't know if his demons would ever leave him. The publicist who later spoke on his behalf asked for positive vibrations for her client, alluding to long-term mental health battles.